So welcome everyone. For those of you that I have not met, I'm Tina McAndrew, the director of the library, and tonight is another installment with Sustainable Stow. If you have questions or comments that you'd like to make, you can use the chat feature. It will be checked periodically. It may not be checked right away, but we will get to your questions and your comments. And I will turn it over to Sharon to introduce the guests for this evening.
Thank you, Tina. So I'm Sharon Brownfield. I'm a member of Sustainable Stow, and this is our monthly series about informing you all of different avenues that can make you save money as well as be good for the environment. I am thrilled tonight to introduce Jason Taylor. He's an energy specialist and heat loss expert who will be our speaker. For the last 17 years, he has worked as a contractor for a number of firms, including Biggermeister, a firm that specializes in designing and building sustainable homes. He has also been training green job workers for the last 12 years at the Green Jobs Academy and ABCD Weatherization Lab in Boston. So he really has an in-depth knowledge of what you can do to help insulate and seal your house so that you are not, as he would say, heating the outside or losing money through your roof. So with that being said, I turn it over to Jason.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Unfortunately, before I begin here tonight, I have a little confession that I have to make. You see, I have a bad gas problem. You see, my furnace makes bad gas, and the bad gas from that furnace and the bad gas from everybody's furnace and the bad gas from all the fossil fuels that we burn are doing something to the atmosphere that stops the heat from escaping, so that it's getting warmer just a little tiny bit, just a couple of degrees. But if you know anything about physics, you will know that warm air holds more and more moisture. And so when that warm air that's holding more moisture hits a cold front, we are getting more precipitation very fast. Precipitation has increased by about 11% since the 80s. And we're having this thing called flash floods, which I've never seen before like this. I've watched the ones happening in Europe. We had them happening in Worcester. We had them happening in Philadelphia, in Arizona, all over the world it's happening. China, villages, you can see it online. Villages were actually washed down rivers in Germany and in Belgium. So any reason, what I want to make what my theory is here: less bad gas, less flash floods. That's what I'm going to say today. And so I have collected, there was another group that I was part of a group that began a nonprofit known as HEAT. And that started about 12 or 15 years ago. And since then I began collecting things that reduce the bad gas. And I have a list of those. They're water, electricity, food, air sealing, recycling, transportation, insulation, public utilities, renewable energy, conservation, and trees. And I try to do one of those things every single day to reduce gas, because that's how serious this is. But what we're talking about today is going to be air sealing and insulation. And air sealing is one of those very obscure things that not a lot of people know about. I hope to explain it. If you go and you ask 100 people what they think they would need to do to stop the heat loss from their house, I would say 99 of those 100 people are going to tell you add more insulation. And they are partly right. However, the real secret, as you will find out tonight, is air sealing. What is air sealing? Well, let me explain it to you really quickly. Imagine for a moment that there are two boxes completely alike in every way, same size, same shape, same material. The only difference, the first box is completely sealed up. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. But the second box has holes in it, cracks along the sides, holes at the top. First box, no holes. Second box, holes. Heat them both up with the same amount of heated air and shut that heat off. Which one loses the heat first? It's obvious, isn't it? The one with the holes loses the heated air first. I've been asking this question for 12 years now at the Green Jobs Academy, and not one of my students has ever gotten it wrong because it is obvious. So the thing is, this is the thing that we didn't know. We all live in big boxes with holes in them. We have cracks along our sides, underneath our siding that you don't even know about until you strip the siding down. We have big holes by code. It's this really strange code. It's not based on building science, but we have code that we are supposed to put holes at the top of our attics, attic ventilation, they call it, which is different from the ventilation that we need to breathe inside of our house. It's a completely separate system. And the amount of holes that we have is insane.
Jason,
At the top.
yeah, you just went on mute there. Yeah, everybody else should be on mute. I think Tina helped us with that. Now you're back. Okay.
So you can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So attic ventilation means that there's big holes that they deliberately put at the top of your house, gable vents, soffit vents, ridge vents. These are all vents in your roof, which is okay unless you have holes on the floor of your attic, which is your air barrier. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm almost positive that you do. And I'm going to show you pictures of those holes so that you can see what they look like. Oh, how much money is this going to save you by air sealing? Let me tell you about an experiment that was done. It was completed in 1993. It was the first building science experiment using air barriers, air barrier repair, air sealing as the control. 80 buildings. This was in Philadelphia. 40 of them just got insulation in the attic. That's it. No air sealing. The other 40 got air, blower door guided air sealing, followed by checked with this thing called zonal pressure diagnostics. And then they had the insulation added. When they looked at the heating bills, the first 40, the ones that just got insulation, their heating bills reduced by 8%. But the ones that had air sealing and insulation, they were reduced by 18%, 10%. Air sealing is more important than insulation. Now listen to this. There's another thing about it. The air movement in your house, there's a thing, it's a very potent force known as the stack effect. Convection is another name for it, or the chimney effect. And what it is warm air has a tendency to rise and go out the holes at the top of your building, which create a negative pressure in your basement, which sucks in cold air, which then gets pulled up, warmed, rises, goes out the top, which makes a negative pressure, which sucks in cold air at the bottom, which then goes out at the top, which sucks more cold in at the bottom. This is happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The colder it is outside, the stronger those forces, the taller the building, the stronger those forces, the bigger the holes at the top, the more heat that you lose. And if you seal it at the top, not only do you stop the heat from leaving at the top, but you also stop the cold air from getting pulled in at the bottom. You get 2 for the price of 1. Sealing it at the top is the best thing, the most important thing that you can do. And the other thing about that is it makes you uncomfortable. That's what creates draftiness. A lot of people think it's having windows that are crappy, but the actual truth is, and it's very easy to seal those up very quickly with caulking or plastic or whatever. There's really easy ways to do that that are cheap, but windows are expensive. But really what it is, the heat loss part of this is the fact that it's a constant pulling of cold air into the house, and as the warm air sucks it out by leaving at the top. So it's a comfort thing. I want you to imagine a beautiful spring day. You walk outside, it's 65 degrees, and you go, oh, this is glorious. This is a beautiful day. And yet If it's 65 degrees in your house, you're freezing, you're cold. It's because that constant movement of air is taking your body heat away. When you seal it up, you actually can be very comfortable in your house at 65 degrees. I'm tempted to go walk over to my thermostat because it is 65 degrees in here right now, and I'm very comfortable. I think I'm ready to do the slides. Yes. Okay. Now, bear with me. I got to do something technical here. I'm going to do share screen. If I mess up, I apologize, but I hope I don't. Okay. Okay. I'm on. All right, great. This is everything you wanted about air barriers, but we're afraid to ask. Oh, okay. Here's a picture of a house. Let me guess. Which side of the house has a little insulation? Well, it's obvious, the one with the snow. We call this poor man's IR camera, because you can basically go out on a day where there's 1 inch of snow and you can walk around and you can see who doesn't have their air barrier sealed at the top. So obviously this is a finished attic on one side, it's an unfinished attic on the other side. They haven't done any air sealing at all. I could explain things better, but I'm going to keep going. But I love you. Check this out. We're going to start getting 1 inch of snow. You'll know all your neighbors who hasn't gotten insulation yet. It's great for us because we look at it and we go, okay, there's definitely job security here. All right, I'm going to talk to you about what an easy air barrier is. It's just a box, very simple. You can see there's a lot of snow. If you look at the house behind there, it's melted already. That's because that house has knee walls. Under knee walls, there is a hole. We're going to talk about that in a little while when I talk about all the things that you find, but that is losing heat through the knee wall, underneath the knee wall. This house is an easy house to fix. It's cheap to fix. There's nothing in the way. Now I'm going to talk about the things that make it more complicated. Okay, an easy house will have an unfinished attic with no floor. That's an easy house. That's going to be cheap to fix. If you have a finished attic, it becomes more complicated. I do this kind of work with Big Meister. A lot of times we have to take the walls and the ceilings down and then insulate behind them, put the walls back up, paint them again. We do it all the time, but it's a lot of work, and so it's expensive. But if you have an unfinished attic at the top, it's easy to do. If there's a floor, it's not that hard. It's a little bit of a complication. You might have to remove some of the where the big holes are, but you can also dense pack underneath it. So there's a lot you can do even if there's a floor. Unfinished basement, same thing. We have these things called rim joists. They circle the basement. It's the perimeter of the basement above the masonry where the wood structure begins. And you can see them. They're like rectangles going all the way around the house. And if the walls are up, if you have a finished basement, it is hard to reach those places. That's where cold air, a lot of cold air comes in through there. And it's very difficult to reach those places if there's walls up. So that's no duct work in the attic. Now, actually, you're going to probably have ductwork in the attic. If you do have ductwork in the attic, you want to make sure they're air sealed. They call it duct sealing. You actually seal all the cracks with this special mastic. It's actually finger painting. It's actually kind of fun. In fact, I often thought if I could get kids to do it, they would love it because you're basically doing it with your fingers. You also want to make sure they're insulated. One of the biggest problems that we're going to be facing with heat pumps and everything is if you have ductwork in the attic, those ducts are above the air and thermal barrier. You want those to be brought in to the thermal barrier. It's the difference of, like, say you have air conditioning in the summertime, it's about 110 degrees in the attic. You want to send 70-degree temperature. So that's a big difference between 70 degrees and 110 degrees. But if you insulate it, now you're talking about, if you insulate the top, you've brought it in, or if you put something over it so it's insulated, it's brought in, and that will, again, now you're talking about like 80 degrees to 70 degrees. It makes a big difference. That's called the delta T, by the way. And the bigger the delta T, the bigger the difference between the inside and the outside, the more heat loss is going to be, or in this case, the more air conditioning lost. No recessed lights in the attic floor. That's a big one. That's a thing that you guys are probably not going to have to deal with Mass Save, but you might be dealing with people who are trained by Mass Save contractors. Recessed lights are not really well provided for Mass Save at this point. A recessed light on your top floor That's your air barrier. That's the place you want that to be perfect. You don't want any holes in that air barrier, because if you do, that warm, moist air is going to escape into the attic. You don't want that. But a recessed light, you cut a hole in that air barrier, you put a can with a lot of holes in it. We've actually checked recessed lights, and they lose, it's about 20 to 50 CFMs, which is a measurement that we do. I'm going to get to when we talk about the blower door. It's quite a lot when you multiply them by, I mean, I've seen houses that had 75 recessed lights. There are ways of dealing with it or proper. I'm going to tell you the right way to do it. And hopefully this will work out for you, because a lot of people do have them. Skylights are whole house fans. Skylights, another problem. Skylights tend to be about R2. R2 is how we measure the resistance. R stands for resistance. The resistance of heat to move through something. Code in Massachusetts right now is R49 in your attic. You're going to have a skylight, which is R2. Code is R49. You can't even get a skylight that's R49. The best you can do is R8, and that's going to cost you so much money. It's like $4,000, not including the installation. They're out there, but they're expensive. There are things you can do about it. And whole house fans are fantastic in the summer. They really work. They suck all the warm air out at night, as long as there's cold air outside, cooler air in the nighttime. And there's ways to do it. We build boxes around them with a cover that comes off, so you can take it off so that you can use it, because they actually are very effective, and they don't use a lot of electricity. What else do we have here? Knee walls. Okay. A lot of people have knee walls. A knee wall, the problem with the knee walls is below the knee wall is a gap. And I've seen it as big as 11 inches. And it goes all the way under the whole side of the house. If it's a cape, you got it going all the way, 11-inch gap going 25 or 30 feet in that direction, 25 or 30 feet in that direction on the other side of the house. Warm air goes through there, and it goes up the slopes and escapes out the top of the attic. We actually seal them. We put a little block underneath there. And so that makes it a little bit more of a complicated house, but very easy to do. It's not difficult. The only problem is you might have to cut holes to get into the knee walls in some cases. A lot of people have doors and stuff so you can get in there, but sometimes they don't. Dormers are tricky. They're often only 2x3. It's not a lot of room for insulation. Big Meister, we tend to take the walls down and insulate with foam, because with 2.5 inches, the foam's like R6.5, so you get a little bit better R value than you do with cellulose, which you can drill holes through it, and you can put cellulose, and that's 3.4. The R value is 3.4. I don't know if I'm getting too geeky for you, but I apologize if I am. So cathedral ceilings are tough because a lot of times they don't have enough room. The new ones are pretty big. The dumbest thing is actually if you have soffit vents at the bottom, which let the cold air in, and you also have recessed lights in that cathedral ceiling. That's a big boo-boo, because you've got the cold air coming in. You got a light that's hot. It's a great way to get ice dams, because that warmth from that light and no insulation next to it will warm the snow until it melts. It turns to water. It goes down until it hits a cold spot where it becomes ice. And eventually that builds up so much that the melting snow can no longer go off the house. It backs up and it goes into the house. And you've seen this happen on occasion. And I fix these things all the time. It's a classic thing that happens when there's a lot of snow and a lot of cold outside. Additions. Now, here's the thing that Mass Save contractors miss a lot, unfortunately. You want to make sure they don't. If you have additions, there's always, I'm going to tell you, always a crack, a hole where the new meets the old. And I've done houses that had 4 additions attached to them, and every single one of them had a hole, and it's a crack along the whole addition, basically at the bottom of the addition. So that's something you have to know about. And if you're hiring someone to fix this, you want to make sure that they take a look at that and fix it. Backplaster in walls is another thing that happens. I think it happens more in my neck of the woods. I'm in Cambridge. We have a lot of Victorians. In the old days, people would put back plaster before they put the sheathing on the outside of the house. They would actually put plaster and lath as a way of reducing the breeze coming through. But now, if you're going to insulate using cellulose, you're going to have to, you take a piece of the siding off, you're going to drill through the sheathing. Now you have to do a second hole where the back plaster is, and it's aggravating. It takes a lot of extra time. So a lot of contractors will have to charge you a little extra money if you have back plaster. But I don't think you guys are going to have that where you are. But I could be wrong. Maybe somebody knows. Mike Duclos might know. I don't know. All right. For a complicated attic, I recommend you get a second opinion from somebody like a HERS rater. And speaking of Mike Duclos, he started a company. I believe it's called New England HERS Rating. He's retired, as I understand, but they continue, and they're really good guys, and they really understand houses. And from what a lot of these guys are telling me, I've done presentations with them on occasion, and these HERS raters are telling me that there are certain situations that are quite frequent, actually, where when you hire one of these guys, they actually can somehow they get money back in a way. And I don't know how it works exactly, but it's something they might want to ask Mike about. But they actually sometimes get more money back than the cost of the HERS raters. And these guys really understand the systems. They do it right. They look at it with an IR camera. They give you a number for how leaky your house is. They do a blow-a-door test. They're really good. The problem with people trained by the Mass Save program is the Mass Save people don't always tell you what your house needs. They only tell you what the program provides for you. So they can leave out a lot of really important things. Oh, I missed one of the things too. A flat roof attic is tricky as well. That was on the previous slide, and somehow I skipped it. But yeah, those are tricky. A lot of times with flat roof attics, if you can't get in there, you only have an opportunity to insulate those when you're getting ready to put a new roof on. And you would add 6 inches of polyisocyanurate, which is foam board. But that's, anyway, I'll go forward. Oh, okay. So I talk about the blow-a-door. I'm in love with the blow-a-door. Please don't tell my wife. She doesn't know. She's a little jealous, but the blow-a-door is the thing that revolutionized learning how houses lost heat. And so I'm going to show you real quick what blow-a-door guided air sealing looks like by this little video on a building that I did in New York City. And if you look, the blow-a-door sucks this smoke. We're in an attic right now. It's sucking the smoke down so that you can see that there is a gap there. So it's basically pulling the air. The blow-a-door is a big fan that blows the air out of the house. So if you go outside of the air barrier and check it with smoke, you will see that the smoke is getting pulled into the house, which it shouldn't. Now, this guy, he's an engineer. I trained him. He had only been learning how to blow foam for about 20 minutes before we decided to make this film. And you're gonna see, he's gonna check it after he blows the foam. He's gonna check the smoke again, and you're gonna see that the smoke is no longer going down, which means we have succeeded in air sealing. This is the classic way of how we learned how to do blow-a-door guided air sealing in the 90s, in the 2000s, the 2010s, and hopefully to this day, people are still doing it because it's the best way. I check all my work this way. You see how it's no longer getting sucked in now? You're gonna see something though. See, it's getting sucked to the right. Why is it getting sucked to the right? Let's have a look. Oh, let's take a look. Do you see that? It's a big hole. It's balloon framing. We're going to have a picture of balloon framing right now, a little bit later. Balloon framing is when they built the walls and they didn't put 2x4s at the top. So it's basically a 4-inch gap going. This one goes all the way down the main part of the house, all the way down the center of the house, I should say. It's the assist, and it's a huge gap that lets a lot of heat into the attic. The other thing I want to say about letting heat into the attic, when you insulate without air sealing, you've made the sheathing at the top underneath the roof colder now. If warm, moist air gets up there, the warm, moist air will condense, because cold things condense, heated things expand. So it's going to condense and squeeze the water out of it until you get little droplets of water. That's condensation. And the trouble with getting little drops of water on the underside of your roof is it can feed mold. It can create rot. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So you really, really, really want to air seal. There's a number of reasons why. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this one. Yes, I think I'm on the right one. Okay, zonal pressure diagnostics. So this was something that was invented by the guy who did the experiment down in Philadelphia, that controlled experiment I told you about. Basically, you run the blower door at -50 pascals. It's a pressure. And what that does is it will, then you go to the air barrier, and that air barrier should be as close to 50 as possible. If it's way below 50, they miss something big. It's a little trickier than that because it's a double air barrier. And if there's no ventilation in the roof, no attic ventilation, then it's going to be harder to get that number to be 50. But anyway, you want to know what you're doing. But this is a way of checking your air barrier after the work is done. I highly recommend that you tell the people who are working on your home that are doing the air sealing that you are going to have it checked by zonal pressure diagnostics. You don't have to do it, but if you tell them that, they're going to work harder, because you're going to call them back if you don't get a number that's close to 50. And if they know that, they'll do better work. I want you to have the best air barrier you can possibly have. So please don't be afraid to use psychology. Okay, how many houses leak heat? You can see in this picture, this is my neighborhood a few years ago. You can see I've got 4 houses. 2 of them have snow on it. 2 of them are completely leaky. Again, this is something I love to do in the wintertime because I just know there's so many people who need work done at the top of their house. We have such a big job ahead of us to get this work done. I wanted to talk to you. This was a slide that Michael Blasek. He's actually the guy who invented zonal pressure diagnostics and did the experiment down in Philadelphia. He came up with this slide in 2011, but the number's a little bit different now. And I wanted to tell you roughly what you can expect. To insulate an 1,000 square foot attic and air seal it is probably going to cost you somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 if it's completely empty. Mass Save has a refund. Unfortunately, Stow and the Hudson Power and Light does not have a refund for that, which is unfortunate. So for Mass Save, instead of paying $3,000, you'd only pay $750, which is a real incentive to get it done. To insulate empty walls, 1,000 square feet of walls is a very small amount of walls. Oh, let me just say too, insulating an empty attic will typically save you approximately about 20% of your heating bills. It depends on the size of it, but about 21% you can expect. Insulating empty walls can save you about 18%. It makes a big difference if you have no insulation or nothing in the attic. We just did a job in Big Meister did, and they had no insulation in the walls, no insulation in the attic, and we insulated it. We put in heat pumps, and they lowered their energy bills by 80%. Now, I'm just saying that's a really unusual thing. That's because they started off with nothing. Most people have some stuff in there, but when you have stuff in there, you're still losing a lot of heat through the holes, through the places that don't have any insulation. So you really do want to have them completely air sealed, completely insulated. So insulating empty walls, 1,000 square feet is probably, again, going to cost you about $2,500, depending on what kind of siding you have, because they do it from the outside, but sometimes they do it from the inside, and that may cost a little bit more. Again, the Mass Save rebate is fantastic. It's 75% of that they pay for, so that's kind of beautiful. So I'm going to go down to the bottom. Air sealing using blower door guided air sealing. Again, for Mass Save, you're not going to believe what they charge. Zero. That's pretty tough to beat. Zero. But if you hired somebody, they're probably going to charge you for 1,000 square feet. They would charge you about $750 to $1,000, something like that, just to get you an idea. Most of the payback on these things are between 4 and 7 years. If it's 7 years, that's like putting money in the stock market and having it increase 14% every year, or a bank at 14%. So it really does pay for itself. It's a really good thing to do. Okay, here's a complicated house again. Obviously, I'm looking at it. I know they have not air sealed or insulated it properly because you can see there's melt lines at the top. Here's one, a very complicated house that has snow everywhere. This is on the same exact day, on the same exact street. This is a wealthy neighborhood. I think it was Weston. And look at that house. It's beautiful. I'm almost positive that they did spray foam on the underside. Now, spray foam is an option, but it's going to cost you. Spray foam is going to cost you about $1.10 per board feet, and you want to put about 6 inches or 7 inches would actually be what code is right now. And that's going to cost you about $7.50 or $8.50 per foot. And it's the foot of the slope of your roof. Why that's a good thing to do sometimes is if you have a heating system or duct work inside the attic, because you bring everything into the zone. So it's worth considering if you have the money and if it's a complicated roof. But I've gone to a lot of places and we got them a quote from the insulation person, the foam person. It's a big truck that comes and they mix it up right then and there and they put it on underneath. And it's actually cool to watch. They quite often people say, yeah, that's too expensive. And it isn't always necessary. So no reason to do it if it's not necessary. Now, here's the building that I mentioned to you. It has 4 additions on it. And each addition, the first part of the house is the part in the middle that's got the most leaks. And each addition was a little bit better air sealed and insulated. But we had to fix everything. We had to connect the dots to everything. You want to connect everything. You don't want a gap, a hole to be anywhere. But again, I just want to emphasize, if you have an addition on your house, it has to be checked. And I highly recommend you check it with zonal pressure. With blower door guided air sealing, because you will see the smoke getting sucked in. Here's a picture of a blower door, just so you see it. This is, I wrote a poem for the blower door because I love it so much. I'm just going to say it real fast. Oh, blower door, you red glowing beauty, giver of wisdom, revealer of mystery and hidden secrets, perfection maker, you lift me with your sweet, lusty breeze. Though some may think that I'm a bore, I'll never stop my blower door. I love it so much. It has changed my life. I'm going to show you a picture of a number of the blower door. What a blower door can do. It can give you a number for how many square holes of square inches of holes you have in your house to the outside. And you can see this number over here. It's the CFM's -50. A blower door tries to get the house to -50 by sucking the air out with the fan. And if it's really tight, that fan doesn't have to work that hard. So not a lot of air goes through that fan. But if there's a lot of holes in the house, that fan goes like crazy to get to -50. And so a lot of air will go through that fan. So on the left, you see it's 14,133. On the right, it's 1350. That's my house, by the way. I've since got it down to about 1240. I haven't measured it in a while. Although I do put it up in the summertime because we don't have air conditioning in our house. My wife hates it. So what's great is I can use the blower doors and an attic fan. I can suck all the heat out of the house. She hates it. She goes, "What are you doing?" Because it makes a lot of noise and stuff. But it's a fantastic thing. So each CFM stands for cubic feet per minute going through the fan, has an equivalent leakage area of 0.1 square inch. So if I take this one that's 14,000, I divide it by 10 or multiply it by 0.1, I get 1,413 inches of holes in that air barrier. That's the entire house. That's 1,400 would be about 14 inches. So that's about 14 inches times 100, which is about 8.5 feet. So it's basically all the way up to my ceiling, 14 inches all the way to my floor. That's letting the heat out of the house all winter long. That's a big number. My house is only 135 square inches, which is about 13 by 10. So I would say a square about this big, and it's still a pretty big hole. But people worry about making a house too tight. Very hard to do. We're doing it now with new building. Very hard to do with a house that's already been built, unless it's a very small house. And we know how to account for that. And there's some issues that happen, but it's really hard to do. It's really not an issue to be that concerned about. The other thing to blow a door does, as I showed you before, is it exaggerates the leak. So you can see, if you blow smoke, you can see the smoke getting sucked in. You foam that, and then you check it again, and it's gone. And this is on the outside, sucking air out. This is just a window. This is a recessed light in an attic that's sucking the smoke down into the house. Again, you don't want to have that, and I'll show you how you fix that. So our air barrier is important. I mentioned the comfort factor. When you seal the top of that house like that, at the top, your air barrier is perfect at the top. You are no longer having that draftiness. And I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. I'm so tempted to go and show you my thermostat right now. Should I show you my thermostat real fast? No. Okay. All right. It reduces the energy bills 10%. On average. Michael Blasnick, after he left Philadelphia, he started looking at energy bills all over the country, entire states. He would check what worked, what didn't work, what measures he would do the utilities. He worked for Mass Save for years. He worked for Maine. He worked for the entire state of New Hampshire, and he would analyze the data, and he says pretty much it's about 10%, and that's an average, and that includes people who don't do a good job at air sealing, so it's probably better. And I've heard people say 20%, but we do so much at the same time that it's hard to say. Oh, another reason why air barriers are important, climate change. Oh, you see this? That's Houston, I believe, has begun. This is, we're going to see this a lot of this flooding, flash floods. You can look up flash floods online. You can Google it. You can't believe the things that have happened this most recent year. That's a flood. 2020, this is the number of billion-dollar weather and climate disasters that happened in the US. There were 20 of them, believe it or not. 2020, we had 20. All of them made worse by climate change. You might probably all know that, so I don't want to talk about it that much, but I can't help it because it's why I got into this business. It's why it's so important to me. And I chose air barriers to repair because it was an obscure thing that few people knew about. And I thought we need to do this. This is the 10 most typical places to air seal in an attic. These are typical holes that everybody probably has. Around a chimney, by code, there needs to be a 2-inch gap that only has non-combustible things. So what most people have been doing for years is they just make a big hole. And I have been in holes that you can jump into around a chimney. So there are big holes up there. And you want to see what kind of holes you have around your chimney. And this is the right way to do it. Everybody knows how to do this now, I think, in Mass Save. You don't want to put foam, so you do aluminum flashing and a special fire caulking that expands when it gets hot, so it gives you extra time to get out of the house if there's a fire. It's a code that they need. Recessed lights, as I said, 20 to 50 CFM. So that means if you divide it by 10, each one of these has between 2 and 5 inches of holes, letting heat out of your house. On the left is a thing that Mass Save was doing for a while. The proper way to do it is to put boxes around them. There is another way you can do it that I highly recommend. They have these flat pancakes. I wish, I don't have a picture of one, but they're flat pancakes. And they have it's like a half of a bulb. You take out the old bulb, you screw that bulb in, you connect the pancake to it, and the pancake is an LED. It goes flat up against the ceiling, and the heated air can't get past it. Sometimes if it hangs down a little bit, we caulk around it, but they cost like $5 to $8 at Home Depot. It's a really easy way to do it. And then they could insulate over it because, the other thing about recessed lights, are they IC rated? If they're IC rated, That means you can put insulation right up against them. Some people say insulation contact is what IC stands for. It's actually intermittent current, which means that there's a little thermocouple in there and it shuts off at 165 degrees, which if you have LEDs in there, that is not going to happen. But if someone puts an incandescent in there, now you've got a chance, if you don't have an IC rated light, that it could, if it reaches 400 degrees, it could catch fire. Isn't that the burning of papers for, what was that? The science book for 451, Fahrenheit 451, I think it was. Sharon knows. I can tell, Sharon, just by your face. I can tell you know. I think it's 451. So if you reach 451, you could have a fire. So it's a little, yeah, you want to be careful of that. But there's ways around it, and I want you to do it. So I want you to do it cheaply and effectively. Bathroom fans. Again, they cut a hole in our air barrier. They put a fan in there. You have to have a bathroom fan. It has to be connected to the outside. You don't want any moisture going into that attic. We build boxes around them quite often. We actually foam around them if they don't have lights in them. But Mass Save made a rule recently, and I teach Mass Save using this. So I have to teach my guys to use FB 136, my students on this. That's the fire caulking. But anyway, yeah, you want to seal all those holes. Sting pipes. A sting pipe is basically, in order for your water to drain, there cannot be a cover at the top. You might remember maybe when you were a little kid, you would take a little straw and you would take your Coca-Cola, you put your finger at the top of the straw, lift it up, and the Coca-Cola would lift up in the straw. And as soon as you lifted your finger, the Coca-Cola would go down. That's a sting pipe. You have these, everybody's got one. I like to say everyone's got a sting pipe. Basically, they're made out of PVC pipe, or they're made out of cast iron. You'll see them going out of everybody's roof. And it's so that things will drain. It's code. You have to have them, and it's a good code. You need to have them. But often a sting pipe is built, the plumbing is built, and they put the walls in afterwards. So there's a big gap at the top. That's a big hole. I've seen that be 250 CFM reduction from doing that, from sealing that up, the picture on the right. So you might have a sting pipe above you will have a sting pipe above your bathroom. And if it's in a wet wall, you definitely want to get that sealed up. All the wall tops, believe it or not, every single partition wall in your house has cracks along the sides that let heat out. They have holes that the electricians have drilled in there to hang wires through. Those have to be sealed up. And sometimes the holes are big. This is the main wall going right down. It's the supporting wall going right down the middle of the house. And you can see there's a big gap on the left. It's like an inch. So you're talking about 40 feet times 40 times 12 times an inch. That's a lot of CFMs if I did the math, but I'm not going to bore you with the math. Duct work. Again, they cut a hole in the air barrier. They put this box in there, the boot, and they don't always foam around it. You have to foam around that boot so that there's no air that can escape through there. It's odd because you want this to bring conditioned air into your house, and yet it mixes with the attic air. You want to seal that up. This happens a lot. Insulation. Both of these houses were ice dams. Ice dam problems. You can see the one on the left. There was a big hole in there. I sealed it up. Easy to do. Not only did it stop the ice dams, but the people said for the first time since they've been living in that house, they had heat in one of their rooms. They said, I don't know what you did up there, but we had heat for the first time. This guy had awful ice dams. His house was a mess. We fixed it though. We had to insulate. He had big things that weren't insulated in his duct work. And again, it was melting the snow would turn to ice, and then the water came into the house. Attic entrances. To get into the attic, you have to go through an entrance. They cut a hole so you can go in. The one on the left is what you do. It's a pull down stairway. When you put the stairway up, the stairway protrudes. So we build these boxes. We call them thermodomes or T-domes. They work great. Not only do they air seal and save you about 150 CFMs, but they also insulate, because you do not want to have a missing place with this insulation. It's unbelievable how much heat escapes when the R value is only R1, which is what wood is. So this would be R1 with the thermodome. It's, I believe that was R10 So you're R11 and you've reduced it. The heat loss is a reciprocal of the R value. So if the R value is 1, you're losing 1 BTU, British thermal unit of heat, is how we measure heat. It's the heat of one wooden matchstick, approximately, if you burnt that whole thing. There's a more complicated reason, but I'm going to skip it for now. So if it's R1, for every foot, you're losing 1 British thermal unit, and then you have to multiply by the delta T and everything. But if you go to R11, you're only losing 1/11 of a BTU. It's a huge difference just by putting one of those in. On the right is a what do they call it? A scuttle hatch. It's pretty typical. Here's what you want it to look like when you're done. You want to have some weather stripping around it. You also want to have at least 2 inches of foam board on the top. And a lot of people, code is actually, you're supposed to match what the rest of the attic is. So it should be 7 inches of foam, but that's a lot. And most people just do 2 inches, but sometimes they do more. They should do more by code. Walk-up attics is a tricky one. You actually have to drill through. Now, this was a church that we did, and in this one, we actually insulated with bats on the inside, and then we added polyiso. This is the foam board. Because with a walk-up, you have to insulate, you have to connect all the dots. So you want to, if you have insulation going along the floor of the attic, now you have to do the side walls, you have to do the steps, and you have to do the door. Everything has to be insulated. You can't have a missing spot of insulation because the heat will pour through that place. So the other thing about this door, we put weather stripping around the door, and we also, the big gap at the bottom, it was like 2 inches. So we put a door sweep. It's very important that you separate the heated air from the unconditioned air in your attic. Gable ends, that's the triangle part of the house, and we're almost finished here. It's the triangle part of the house. And if this is balloon framing, which is what this is, again, basically balloon framing is that if I were Elastic Man, do you remember Elastic Man in the comic books? If I were Elastic Man, I could stick my hand all the way down from the attic into that gap, all the way down, and tickle somebody down into the basement. It's just a big gap, and it lets all the heat rise and go into the attic. You want to seal that, and as you can see here, you want to seal it at the top, and you also want to seal that gap below. I'm acting like you're going to be doing the air sealing. Maybe you will, but that's because my students do the air sealing, so I want to make sure they don't forget that. Oh, then there's always surprises. This was in a church. I had an infrared camera. All of a sudden, I look at these drawers. I see 40 degrees coming through there. 40 degrees inside the church. I pulled the drawers out, and I could see an attic right behind there. It was completely exposed. The drawer was completely exposed. So we built a box out of insulation, the polyisocyanurate, the foam board. We built a box around it and solved that problem. And junction boxes, as opposed to a recessed light, which is a light that goes into the attic, junction boxes are where the lights come down into the house. And it's a big, again, they cut a hole in the air barrier, and you need to foam around that so that the heat doesn't escape through it. This is just all of them together. 3 common other things, drop soffits. For some reason in Victorians, in my neck of the woods, do you have Victorians out there? You might have a few. You have a few. Okay. For some reason, the closets, they always drop the ceiling in the closet, and you need to continue the air barrier at the top. It's the easiest way to do it. So you add a board along there, foam it up, and then add insulation at the top. Just something you need to know. I know you have split levels. You want to connect all the dots with the split levels. You can't leave anything. So this vertical place over here has to have some insulation put into there, and then often we'll put foam board and we'll spray foam so that the heat, and plus you got to add insulation on the floor here and insulation at the top there, as well as a dam. We put fiberglass dams up there so the insulation doesn't fall into the house if we're using cellulose. Cellulose is the cheapest way to do it. That's why I bring it up, but you can use fiberglass too, as long as it's air sealed well. I also like Roxol mineral wool bats because they're fireproof, which is kind of nice. Here's a knee wall space. I unfortunately don't have, now if you can imagine, this had on the side where the fiberglass is on the left, the pink fluffy stuff is the fiberglass. On the side of that, that's the heated house. Now below this floor, well, it's not really a floor, you can see that there's joists that are about 8 inches. There is a gap underneath there. You have to seal underneath that gap, or continue the slopes, insulate the slopes, continue the foam board along the slopes, and insulate all the way to the exterior walls. You have to connect the dots. So if you have a knee wall here, you have to seal it and insulate the L part of it, or you can insulate and air seal the slopes down to the exterior walls. And I think that's it. Oh, this is a picture my son sent to me. This was in Philadelphia this year. They had a flash flood, and this is a highway, and the whole, he was calling it the 76 Canal. It's Route 76. It was just, I mean, I've never seen stuff like this before. So that's my last picture. I just want to end with that, because anybody that can reduce the bad gas is making a difference in climate change. Every little bit helps. The less bad gas, the less Philadelphia 76 Canal. Thank you, everybody. And I can take questions now if you want. What? Oh, I got to stop share, right? Stop share. And what else do I do?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So I'd like to go ahead and open it up for anybody who might have some questions of Jason. Yes, Ellen, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I remembered that. How do you feel about wool as an insulation material?
I love it.
Yeah.
I haven't worked with it. I have a friend who did it in her house. She's the executive director of heat, and she said it was great to work with. She loved it. It's hard to get. I've attempted to once. Somebody wanted to do it once, and I said, yeah, I'm game. I don't know what the R value is, but it's really great to work with, from what I understand, because fiberglass is so itchy, and cellulose is dusty, and foam, you got to leave the house for not the spray foam, the single part spray foam I do. You don't have to leave the house for that, but if you're foaming the underside of a roof or a basement, you have to leave the house for 24 hours just because there's off gassing.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Arnie.
Yeah, first of all, fantastic presentation. I mean, I think you've got a real opportunity there in a lot of areas. It's just great. But I have a question for you, similar to what you were talking about throughout the presentation. We had a townwide initiative here almost a couple of years ago, called Heat Smart, and as part of that, I had a blower door test on my house. I got a value. I had the contractor who did it also did insulation and air sealing. And I asked him, what can be done and how much would it cost? And he said, I don't really know. I mean, he said, we can send a couple guys in, work in your attic for a day, and it is what it is. And that didn't leave me feeling too comfortable with what was the payback, or what was I going to benefit from this work. It sounded from your presentation as if there were ways to, first of all, measure the before and after, and also maybe approximately be able to say, well, if you did this, this, and this, we think that would result in this additional amount of air sealing. Is that something you should expect
I
from a
mean,
contractor?
so I teach zonal pressure diagnostics to my students and I do it myself. Zonal pressure diagnostics also has this thing that you can do if you have the formulas. And it's really easy to do. There's a thing called Red Calc. You can go online. It's free. It does the math for you. And you can take measurements across the air barrier, both with the hatch open and the hatch closed, and plug it into this computer, this algorithm, and it will tell you the most that you can cut, the most it's possible to cut out of your attic. So I could actually tell you what the most possible, the number of CFMs that could be reduced from your attic. So there are ways to do it. I teach people how to do it, but they don't get paid to do it. Most of the guys I teach are in the Mass Save program or the low income program. The low income program is doing zonal pressure diagnostics right now, and they're coming up with the best results of anybody other than me. And I don't, my son goes, "Oh, you're so conceited, Dad." But it's just because I do blower door guided air sealing. I check the work because I just feel like it's the last opportunity someone's going to be crawling around in the attic trying to find holes. So it's really important if you're fighting climate change that you got to get it right. So yeah, I don't know. It might be that the guy, what was in your attic? Because it might have been just a scary attic. What was in the what was existing in the attic?
Well, the attic, and we do have an addition, right? The house is actually in three. There was a main house and an addition on one side, addition on another side. We do have recessed lights in parts of the house. In the winter, certain parts of the house seem to melt the snow quicker than other parts of the house. I can't, I was sort of hoping that the contractor could tell me what it is that I needed to do and what he thought the impact of that would be on how leaky my house would be. But he didn't seem to be, and I have to give him credit for that. He didn't make any promises, but neither did he give me any sense of what he would be able to accomplish. So
is it a big house? He might have been, maybe he was just afraid of sticker shock. I don't know. But it's so what I was getting at is if there's nothing in the attic, the air sealing takes no time at all. But if there's blown in fiberglass or blown in cellulose or blown in mineral wool, which is really horrible stuff, you have to remove that or at least get it out of the way so that you can air seal before you insulate. So it might be a question of just what's in your attic is so horrific that he might have deep down not wanted to do the work.
It's possible. He didn't say that.
What's in your attic? Do you know? Is it are they bats or are they?
There's bats on the ceiling of the attic between the joists.
Oh, okay.
And then the recessed lights and a couple of hatch, a pull down stairwell to get into the attic. We actually have two of them. One in the so-called new edition, and one in the original house. So chimney.
So your thermal barrier was the slopes of the attic.
The thermal bit, no. The roof itself is not insulated. It's the insulation is on the floor of the attic. I'm sorry, I probably used the wrong word. Probably shouldn't have used it.
Oh, it's on the floor, and it's fiberglass bats, and he was
fiberglass bats. Yes.
Was there a lot of floors? Are there floors? I'm just trying to think of what.
Well, we put down just some plywood over the years just to be able to store stuff up in the attic. It's not screwed in. No, it's just.
It's just lying
there. Just yeah.
I mean, I could send somebody to you if you want to. I mean, there's definitely. I feel like the guy didn't really give you a chance.
It's possible. I mean, I think what we need, what I needed, is something that was I could hang my hat on, something that I could say, well,
I feel bad saying this, but I feel like I could help you, but I don't want to I feel like it's not, I didn't do this to try to get work. I just feel like you need help. So if you want to talk to me sometime, feel free to call me and I'll try to give you an idea.
I certainly would, but I think, I don't think my house and what happened in my case is necessarily that much of an outlier.
And are you in a place that's served by Mass Save?
No, none of us. We're all in.
Yeah.
Stow.
So he might have been afraid of that. I got to tell you, you get when you have Mass Save, you do what they want you to do. They send you the check in 2 weeks, and the price is 1/4 of what it would be if. So I think he was just afraid that you were just going to say no. That's my guess.
So does anyone know, is there any help for insulation that we need since we're not with Mass Save?
Well, the question, I think, let me phrase it just a little different, Pat. I think that's a great question. The question would be, who does one go to if one is looking to update your air sealing in your house and get a sense of what needs to happen?
Oh, I'm supposed to answer that?
Yes, Jason.
So the tricky thing about who you hire is it's really the individual crew chief that carries so much of the weight of how good the work is. So my strategy, and so I supervise a lot of this work for Big Meister, and I'm on top of them. I mean, I check. So when they install cellulose on the walls, I always put my fingers through, because you're supposed to be a little bit, supposed to have some resistance. So I make sure, and I tell them, look, it's going to be checked by a blow-it door. All the work, I just let them know it's going to be checked. I say it in a nice way. I say, if you want to have feedback, I can tell you what you missed, because I'll check it, I'll take pictures, and I'll send it to you. So they know they're being watched. There's a thing called the Hawthorne effect. People actually, there was an experiment done in the 1920s, and apparently people do better work when they think they're being watched.
Right.
So you
Well,
want to tell them it's
Yeah.
going to be checked.
So the question, let's turn it just a little way. What, if you're going to interview a number of insulation contractors, what are the types of questions you would ask to be able to evaluate which one you would want to go with, or which one you would want to at least give you an estimate?
I mean, so if you ask them, do they use a blow-a-door? There's a blow-a-door test that they do at the beginning, at the end, which doesn't really, it helps a little bit, but yeah, I mean, can you check? I don't know. Do you check for blow-a-door guided air sealing? Do you check the work? Do you mind if it gets checked by zonal pressure diagnostics? Because that will reveal whether they've missed some stuff. So that's a pretty helpful thing. I think that the way I'm leaning right now, to be honest with you, is I think you probably want to contact somebody who's in the low income program. They're just doing better work. The guys who do work for SMOC, the guys who do work for ABCD, they're just doing better work. They're checking the work with zonal pressure diagnostics. I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about them. It's just, if you have a problem when you're working on a low income household and you find something that would be a roadblock for Mass Save, for the low income program, they have ways of dealing it. You just call them up and say, oh, we have this problem. And they say, all right, do it. We'll pay you for it. So they just, the thing that's great about the low income program is that they figured out a long time ago that if less money was being spent on the oil that they were giving at a reduced rate to people, they could spread the oil out further. So they have a real incentive to get it right. Mass save, because it's controlled by the utilities, there's always a utility person there saying, oh, this is too expensive. Like the recessed light thing, that is, to me, an abomination. To not seal recessed lights is the wrong thing to do. And every time we have a heavy snowstorm, people have recessed lights are getting ice dams because Mass Save doesn't, they just ignore the recessed lights because it was too expensive to put boxes. It's like $50 a box and they didn't want to subsidize it. And I don't know the reasons. I used to go to the meetings back in the old days, but they haven't invited me in a while, so.
So Alan, you had a question.
Yeah, so I have a confession to make. I have a working fireplace, and you haven't talked about that, Jason. And you know, I have a heat pump, and I tend to only use the fireplace when it gets really cold, and I know my heat pump is pretty inefficient then. But I've always worried about heat escaping up through the damper, and you know, it's an older fireplace. It's a relatively new wood stove. It's EPA certified and rated. But what is there anything you can do to prevent heat escaping up through the damper and straight up the chimney?
No, no, you have to, because otherwise you'd have carbon monoxide coming into your house. So.
I've heard stories about balloons.
Yes. So you're talking about when you're not using it.
When I'm not using it, yes.
Oh,
Which is
okay.
most of the time.
So it's open. There's a whatchamacallit. There's like a damper in there, but it doesn't sit too well.
Mine is sitting in front of my fireplace so that the flue gas goes horizontal and then up the chimney in the fireplace. And there's a damper that goes right through.
So the balloons are tricky, and I have attempted to work with balloons, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When we've done a lot of churches where they're no longer allowed to use their fireplaces, and what we've done is we've built like plywood things that you could put on the outside. But I think this is a little bit different because you have a wood stove that's connected to it. So I think your best bet may be, and I don't know what it costs, is a damper at the top of the chimney. I have no idea what it costs, but I have worked on houses that have them and they're pretty good. I mean, yeah, they do stop the heat loss. They're not perfect, but you're kind of, it's tricky. And they say, well, regular fireplaces, they say it's basically you're losing more heat than you're getting. But this is different. It sounds like you have a really good wood stove, and it's smart to have something to help on the cold days with the heat pumps, because you need a little boost on those cold days.
I did want to mention that Jennifer, thank you, has put a link in for performance contractors who might be able to give a couple of quotes. So certainly take a look at the chat for that. I had one other question, Jason, and you had mentioned a couple of your examples were with churches.
Yes.
And balloon construction.
Oh, yeah.
We have an old church, and it is balloon construction. So the question is, I mean, the balloon construction is great for putting in wiring and new electrical outlets and all that other stuff, because you just shoot the wire through.
Yeah, electricians like it.
Yeah, but I was told that pumping up insulation within those walls could have a detrimental effect to the walls, because this is an old church, 1800s, of pushing the walls out. How do you seal balloon constructions?
Well, you want to seal them at the top. This is two questions. One is the sealing at the top, and that's to stop the heated air from going into the attic. And there's a way you can do it that we did we do a thing with Harvard School of Government. They do a whatchamacallit, a team building exercise, and they call heat up, and they have us go there, and we find a church that's in the area, and we do free work for them, and Harvard pays for the materials. And we did one with 1 year, and we reduced the blower door number by 12,000 CFMs with just a bunch of volunteers from Harvard. I mean, these are Harvard air sealers, so those are the best. They'll tell you that, right?
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, so you definitely want to seal it. And all we did was we stuffed mineral wool bats at the top, because we only had 4 hours that we could be in there before they were going to eat. So we had to do something that was really fast. But there's another way. I mean, you could do things that were a real true air seal, because that's not. As far as the walls go, you know, it depends on the quality of the walls. I mean, plaster and lath walls are pretty good, but every once in a while, I mean, when I have crew chiefs, we talk about things that, when I teach the crew chief class, I talk about things that have happened. What's the worst thing that ever happened? Have you ever blown out a wall? And almost everybody has blown out a wall at one point. Usually they only do it once, because when it happens, it's just so horrible and you feel so bad. Everyone always repairs it, but it's still not a happy thing to have to, you know, to come to the customer and say, like, geez, we got a problem. But they always fix it. Mass Save and insists on it. So it's not as bad as it might sound. So the walls, you know, it depends. I mean, and I've seen church walls that are like 6 inches thick. So you got a lot of possibility there. If it were you could always put insulation in there and maybe not dense pack it to the pressure that you try to do. Again, you kind of want to check if there's cracks in there. I don't know why the walls would blow out unless there's a reason behind it. We do this all the time, and it's a very rare thing, but it does. It's not so rare that it doesn't ever happen. It does happen sometimes.
Right. Okay, well, I'm sensitive to the time, and I just wanted to see if anybody else had any questions for Jason. We can try and save the chat that Jennifer has given us a couple of links in. So any last questions? Oh, yes, Ellen.
Yeah, Sharon, about the church, the house that we used to live in Connecticut was 2 tall stories plus a finished attic, and it was balloon framed, and the holes went from, you know, the full height of the house. And we had those filled with blown cellulose, and so there was no extra pressure on it. If we had sprayed in the foam stuff, it can expand, and then like you're really sunk. But I don't know how strong our walls were compared to the strength of the cellulose, but there wasn't a problem. And it was a snap, put it in. You just run the hoses up into the attic, it all goes down the holes, and there you go.
Yeah, if there aren't cracks in the walls, you're probably okay. That's what usually happens. We tell them to always look and check. And if you see cracks on the walls, you got to have somebody in there when you dense pack it. I say, you know, you're going to lose a little bit of money, but you got to do it, because if you don't, you just don't want to blow the walls out. But yeah, they would have to have cracks. That would be pretty, you know, it's probably horsehair plaster, and it's probably plaster and lath, and they're pretty tough.
Well, great. So thank you, Ellen. Did I see another hand? One more hand? No. Arnie.
I just want to wrap up, Jason. My takeaway, and tell me if this is right, is that the most cost-effective way to reduce heat loss in your house is to air seal your attic. Is that a general true statement, or, you know, was I misinterpreting what you were?
No, that's a true statement, especially if you have an easy attic, which means not a lot of the things that I brought up, but a lot of those things are not that difficult to fix. There are some things that are just, like I said, if you have a finished attic with walls up and ceilings, that is not going to be cost effective, because you got to take everything down to get to the places where the heat is lost. But if you have an unfinished attic, absolutely, that's going to be the cheapest way you can reduce the heat loss.
Thank you.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Jason, for a very informative conversation about that. Whoever thought that was that much to know about air sealing? It was great.
Thank you.
I wanted to let everybody know that we are having, this is our December month, and our next presentation will be January. I need to look at a calendar real quickly. It's because if I don't do it, I'll always get the date wrong. It will be January 19th. And this one will be about heating and cooling and air pumps. So stay tuned for our information about that. And again, thanks to Randall Library, and thank you, Jason, and thank you all for coming. Oh, I should also mention that this was recorded, and it will be shown on Stow TV, and we will be sending out the link in either the Stow Independent and other media. So tell your friends about it. So with that being said, good night, everyone, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks very much.